Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. So, Valkyr got a somewhat contentious rework amongst the community. Some people hate it, calling it a massive nerf. Some people love it, calling it a massive buff. I'm somewhere a bit in the middle. I don't really have a huge issue with it. However, I did see it as an opportunity to make an interesting new build for her with some of the changes. So let's go ahead and go over that. First of all, we'll go over the Archon Shards, of course. We're using the rare and somewhat odd choice of using 2 shards for raw health, so we have 225 health from each of these 2 Tau-Forged Azure shards, giving us an extra 450 in total. We're using, again, 2 Tau-Forged Violet Archon Shards. If you've noticed, I really like these shards. Each give us 30% health to energy and energy to health conversion, so with 2 of these, that is a 60% equilibrium effect, basically. And we're using 1 casting speed shard. I basically love casting speed on almost any Warframe. It just makes their abilities feel more snappy to use. So this is, of course, a to taste shard, and you can swap this out if you want to. First, let's go over some of the things that changed about her before we look at the actual build here. So let's go to a blank build. So they changed her base health up to, I believe it's now, I have 1200 now because of the shards. So if you subtract 1200 minus the 450, that's 750 health she now has, and 1000 base armor. That's a very nice, clean number to look at. That is a large amount of armor to have before any modding. I mean, wow, that is a lot of armor to have before modding. Still a fairly low energy pool of 225, not a big deal though, not a huge problem. And 185 shields, with the shields don't really matter a whole lot in this build. Now they did change Ripline to be a grouping tool now, which is actually very useful. If you use it on just the environment, you pull yourself to it. If you use it on an enemy though, you pull yourself to the enemy, and that enemy sucks in nearby enemies based off of the modded radius of Ripline, and then do a automated melee attack that Ripline basically does for you using your claw damage. It's actually very, very effective. Move around pretty fast, really good grouping tool, good way to group enemies up to do, your somewhat limited range damage to a lot more guys very quickly. That's very cool. Warcry, nothing has really changed about Warcry except it's now affinity range, so you're basically will always be able to easily have it on your allies, and the armor bonus from Warcry is tripled while you're in her 4th ability Hysteria. So instead of being 50% base armor, it's basically 150% base armor increase, and then still multiplied by your power strength. So when you pair that with the fact that she has a 1000 base armor, that is a lot of armor. Her paralysis now applies a melee damage vulnerability to the enemies, and the speed decrease that being her 4 used to have has now been moved to this. This is the ability that you Helmuth off, basically, because giving a damage bonus to Valkyr, who already did millions of damage and now does even more easily millions of damage because of the damage bonuses that she's received from this rework, this ability is useless. You do not need more damage, and the slow most of the time is completely irrelevant, so we'll Helmuth this off, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Hysteria here is the bread and butter ability. This no longer makes you invulnerable. That is the big quote-unquote nerf that she received. Instead of being literally gray bar immortal like she used to be, she now instead is meant to be a berserker-style health tank. That's why they increased her health, and they massively increased her armor. She's back to being the highest armor frame in the game now. Now, with the amount of base health and armor she has, and with the armor bonus being tripled in Hysteria, she is actually very, very tanky. The only people that are actually going to have issues using her are if you want to take her to legitimate level cap, pretty much. Outside of that, basically nothing has changed. There's almost no difference between being literally immortal and having this amount of EHP. Speaking of which, let's talk about what I'm doing with the builds regarding that. So this is the build that I have settled on. You guys really like my Chroma energy tank build, so here we are. Electric Boogaloo number 2. We're doing Valkyr energy tank with quick thinking and Hunter adrenaline. I know you guys are getting the Chroma video flashbacks. I can already see it. And we are, of course, using the classic choice of Nourish. One of the main reasons why we're using this is because I wanted to be able to fit Blind Rage on this build to get that huge amount of strength without having the cost of the 4th ability just run me dry constantly. And combining Hunter Adrenaline along with the Violet Shard effect with Nourish means that we will constantly have our energy topped up, which is really good because our energy, along with fueling our abilities, is also an extension of our health pool thanks to Quick Thinking. Quick Thinking says drains energy to stop lethal damage with 240% efficiency. What that means is that every point of your energy, of which we're going to have over 1200 energy thanks to battery when we are in the mission, every point of that energy is worth 2.4 points of health. So for example, if you have a 1200 energy pool, that's equivalent to an extra 2,900 nearly extra health. And all of that energy health is affected by armor. So in reality, our energy is actually much tankier than our health is. And thanks to how high her base health is, plus just those 2 shards we put on, we still have 1,200 actual health, even though we haven't actually modded for health at all. We did mod for armor, because of course we like strength, so we put Umbral Intensify, so I went ahead and put Umbral Fiber on too. Just this one armor mod adds 1,300 armor, because again, her base value is so high, so we go from 1,000 to 2,300 before we even have Warcry active, so that is absolutely hilarious amounts of armor. Adaptation, of course, is a fantastic damage reduction. This will work on our health, this will work on the energy tanking, works on basically everything we care about. I am still using Eternal War. Now, Warcry, they did make it recastable. However, Eternal War is still really nice because this still has a benefit of, one, it allows you to be lazy and the ability is just kept up for you without you having to press it ever again, basically. And it allows you to snapshot any temporary strength buffs that you get. So if you're using Power Drain, for example, on your Parazon, which gives you 50%, or the 25% from growing power, or if you're doing a Fisher mission where you get corrupted with the double strength bonus, for example, or a Nidus Spectre, or any other number of temporary power strength buffs, you can use this augment to turn Warcry into a permanent snapshot ability, and then you can keep that strength indefinitely. So for example, if you mod your Valkyr for 300% strength, and then you get corrupted to 600% in a Fisher temporarily, if you cast this Warcry while you have that 600%, as long as you don't cast it again, you'll keep that 600% strength for the rest of the mission, as long as you keep it going with melee kills to fuel this augment. Very, very potent. The rest of it, we're using Overextended. We are sacrificing from strength, but we do really like having this 190 range to make the first ability a really, really good grouping tool. This gives it a 17.1 meter radius, and as you see in the gameplay here, this is fantastic for grouping guys up and then just murdering them with a swipe or two of your claw. Now you can fit whatever Exilus you want up here if you want to spend an Umbra Forma on this build. As you can see, I put this build together without having to spend any Umbra Forma. If you did spend one, you would get 8 extra capacity, which would allow you to use basically any Exilus that you want. We don't need Sure-Footed because her 4th already makes her status immune, and we're going to be in the 4th the entire time. But aside from that, basically up to you. You are still able to fit Mobilize, which is a nice little parkour velocity buff, so I figured why not throw that on there. It still doesn't cost us an Umbra Forma, so it seems like a pretty good value for what it costs. Now here is the melee influence build, and we'll talk about the a fortification build later on. I know you got a little sneak peek there. Of course, per usual, the classic best choice is melee influence. It is hard to beat turning your melee into a literal AoE. Now, speaking of turning melee into an AoE, one of the reasons why melee influence is so good is because of that. It extends the damage of your melee beyond just the direct enemy that you're hitting, and the claws already have a pretty short range, which is why I'm using both Primed Reach and Spring-Loaded Blade. I feel like her claws do enough damage that you can afford to spend 2 of your 8 mod slots on range mods. This takes it up to a 7.15 meter range. The reason why it says 5.15 here is because Spring-Loaded Blade is conditional. This will give you 2 extra meters when you're actually in the mission, though. So it says 5 here. It's actually going to be over 7 meters in the mission. This makes the claws feel so much better to use. If you don't have either of these on, you only have a 2.1 meter range, which is disgustingly low and feels really bad to use, especially in clumps of enemies. Very bad. Now, the reason why I'm still using Prime Pressure Point, even though her new passive effect gives her up to 300% melee damage, is because depending on the level of content you want to take Valkyr to, if you go to a high enough level, and especially depending on how tanky your build is, to where you're constantly triggering your Death Gate buff from her new passive, which allows you to consume your extra melee damage bar to give yourself 5 seconds of invulnerability. If you are worried that you might constantly be consuming that, then you're going to also be consuming that damage bonus, so you want to still have some unaffected damage actually modded onto the weapon here. However, if you feel confident enough in your build that it's going to be tanky enough to where you won't be consuming that bar constantly, then you could drop this for something else, because if you feel like, oh, I'm going to have this 300% melee damage up basically all the time for my rage meter, then sure, you can go ahead and drop this for something else, like maybe the electric dual stat to make the influence procs even more consistent. Totally up to you what you want to put there. The rest of the build, just a generic influence setup. Galvanized Elementalist plus Weeping Wounds takes this paltry 10% status chance all the way up to 66% status chance once you're in the mission, so that does make melee influence electric procs more than reliable enough to still be the best arcane to put on here. Trust me, it is. Blood Rush combined with her Blood Rush plus Galvanized Steel actually combined with her absolutely insane 50% base crit chance gives her guaranteed red crits, essentially absolutely insane crit chance. Of course, we have our crit damage also coming from galvanized steel, our status damage for those spreading electric procs from elementalist, so on, so on. Like I said, just basically, aside from spring-loaded blade, a generic influence build. We will talk about one more build later on, though, if you want to be even tankier than she already is. Speaking of how tanky she is and how much damage she does, now we're finally going to go hop into the mission and showcase this. All right, so here we are on the mission. We've been here for almost 20 minutes, and as you can see, we have over 2,000 kills. And I haven't been cheating. All of these over 2,000 kills, except for like 10 of them somehow, are all melee kills. I'm assuming that's my companion, who knows? So purely using the claws here, it's been super easy, as you can see, since we have over 2,000 kills, and it's not even 20 minutes yet. It's actually over 2,100 kills now. Easily over 100 KPM, purely with meleeing, so the melee influence definitely helps. Valkyr herself does plenty of damage, especially with that extra 300% melee damage that she's gotten, and the extra multiplier. She didn't really need any of the extra damage, but getting the extra damage, of course, obviously does not hurt her ability to kill things. It only enhances it even further. One nice thing about this update is that as opposed to only the slide build doing decent damage on, you know, in some scenarios, now just her regular claw combo, if you just like doing light attack spam and not sliding around everywhere like this, is very capable of killing things. Again, especially now that we can use arcanes on all exalted melees and we have access to melee influence, since this is a melee exalted. Plenty of damage. Survivability is not even close to an issue, at least on regular level content. Again, the only thing that we really lost out on now with Valkyr is the invulnerability in situations like level cap, basically. Content like this, you're still functionally immortal. Let's go ahead and just stand here, and I'll show you how easy it is to just completely tank this without even trying. The only thing I'm going to do is keep my Warcry up, obviously, because that triple armor bonus from Warcry while we're in our 4th ability is a huge part of our survivability. You'll see here, once we get down to having no health, that we'll start energy tanking, and the energy is even tankier than our health is. Another note, the display for Warcry seems to not be correct for some reason right now. It says I have over 1,500% Warcry. Even with the tripling bonus, that's not the correct number. It should not be that high, so I'm actually not sure why it's saying that. But yeah, you can see here, my health is super tanky, and the moment that I start killing, I instantly get my full health pull back, basically because of that lifesteal on the claws. And again, since I got that health back, I now have that huge health pull to regenerate all of my energy pull back, thanks to Nourish paired with Hunter Adrenaline. So super, super easy energy economy loop. Also, basically, an immortality loop. Just about the only thing that's able to kill you on this build is anything that does so much damage that it's able to one-shot you through your entire health pool and your entire energy pool with the massive amount of armor that you have, which is very, very unlikely. Now we can see my Warcry says that it's over 2,000%, so something is definitely bugged about the Warcry display, because last time I checked, I don't have 7 Gorgillion power strength modded on, so I don't know why it says that it's that high. It is very high, though, because again, you do get that triple bonus when you're in the 4th ability, so even if you only have a, you know, 150%, if you have like, well, actually, even just 100%, let's say you just have a 200% strength Valkyr, even if you just have a 100% Warcry, it's now 300% when you're in her 4th ability, so that's why, again, we have so much armor. Now, if you don't like melee influence, you could, of course, use melee fortifications and get a ton of extra armor from that, as I mentioned before. And if you think that you're immortal now, wait until you see how many stacks of fortification you're able to keep up. In fact, let's quickly show some gameplay of that. Quick note for the fortification setup, since you are going to be using fortification now instead of influence in this scenario, there's no reason to use pure electric anymore. And we also don't really care about these stats chance, so you can drop Weeping Wounds and Shocking Touch, and instead go for a Corrosive setup, for example. So now I have Voltaic Strike and Prime Fever Strike. It would be better to run Shocking Touch instead of Voltaic, because again, we basically are just using raw damage in the setup, so we don't actually need the stats chance. I just can't fit it right now. But if you want to, you can go ahead and do that if you could. Now let's go ahead and showcase how much armor that this gives, because it is absolutely hilarious. All right, so we're in the mission here, and if you look in the top right, this icon right here is the fortification stack. Each stack only lasts 10 seconds individually, but there's a unlimited amount of stacks you can have. So however many kills that you have within 10 seconds is how much armor of a bonus you're going to have. And again, that's 210 armor per stack. So 10 stacks is 2,100 armor. Right now, you saw I just got up to around 30 stacks. So depending on the kills per minute that you're able to maintain, this gives you literally thousands of additional armor, which, especially if you're pairing again with our quick thinking idea, which makes our energy even tankier than our health is, and all of that armor applies to it, you are ungodly tanky with this Arcane on. So if you for some reason need to have an absolutely absurd amount of effective health, and you don't mind sacrificing the, the AoE benefit of using melee influence, of course, then you could feel free to use this, and you will functionally be immortal on all regular content, even deep into the hundreds and even thousands of levels. You would really only start to have issues if you are actually trying to go to legitimate level cap with the amount of EHP that this build has and the amount of health sustain and energy sustain and damage output that it has. So this is just another option for you guys. Let's see how many stacks do we have right now. I can't even see it. Where'd the icon go? 22 stacks, yeah. So like I said, you can easily maintain anywhere from 15 to 30 stacks, maybe even more than that, depending on the enemy density. So hilarious way of juicing up your health here. That's about it, guys. Just want to give you a few options, go over my, essentially, opinion on the Valkyr rework. I think for normal players, it's completely fine. You're still functionally immortal, even though we're no longer actually immortal like the 4th ability used to make us. So if you want to take this to Elite, Deep Archimedia, Elite Temporal Archimedia, any of what is usually the hardest content in the game for the average player, you're going to be completely fine. You're not going to die. You're still going to kill everything. We don't need to freak out that much. I do love the new 1st ability. It's a great grouping tool, like that right there. Super fun to do, and actually very effective. So you guys can let me know down below, do you think this is a huge Valkyr nerf? Was this a huge buff for you? Is she more fun to play, less fun to play? I'm always interested in your guys' feedback. Hopefully the video was helpful. Hopefully it was interesting and educational, and I will see you guys in the next one. Just a real quick note, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did and you want to support what I do, you can now do it for cheaper than ever. I just added a new tier to the YouTube membership offer, which is only $1 a month. For anybody that chooses to support me or anybody who already has, I greatly, greatly appreciate you and everything that you do. Thank you very much. And now I will see you guys in the next one.